It has never been more obvious for the Minnesota Wild after another playoffs where the top line was targeted, mainly Kirill Kaprizov. The Wild need to add some depth scoring, and one recent article from The Athletic has linked multiple names to the Minnesota Wild, one in Brock Boeser that we're all familiar with, and we have to dive into exactly what that looks like for the Minnesota Wild, exactly what that will do for the Wild lineup to avoid situations like this year again. But we also have to dive into not just the NHL team, the Iowa Wild, and some specific problems outlined from some of the top Wild insiders. All of that coming up on this episode of Wild Digest. But guys, before we get into the video, we just passed 200 subscribers as I'm recording this, and hey, we got Wild content every single day all off season long. It's completely free to hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date. We want to be that show that you go to on YouTube. Thank you for all the incredible support recently. We're going to be sticking around, myself, Mark, and Kirk. We're going to have your back every single day, and let's start with some Iowa Wild stuff. And we're going to start with some quotes from Michael Russo and Joe Smith from The Athletic. I'll link this article down below. But the big thing here that comes from them, and it's something that I think a lot of us fans also mirror this sentiment, there should be some questions raised here about the struggles with AHL Iowa after it missed the playoffs for the third time in 4 seasons. And look, we know the Minnesota Wild were named the second best prospect pool in the NHL according to Scott Wheeler, also at The Athletic. And you know what? I don't think there's much doubt behind that. A Gazif Boyum coming in, playing his first career games in the playoffs. Jesper Wallstedt, while having a down year, still looks like one of the better goalie prospects in the league. There's a lot to be excited about. But the problem is when you have the Iowa Wild down in the AHL, where so many guys seemingly begin to struggle. And before I dive into even some more stuff, I want you to leave your thoughts on the Iowa Wild down below. What do you think is going on down there? Do you think that the Iowa Wild struggling to the level they are will affect Minnesota in the long term? I mean, look, some Wild fans say Iowa's where you get sent to die. It's not what I want to say, because I think there's lots of good things that come out of Iowa, but honestly, I'll get into that in just a second, actually, bear with me. But again, look, there's only 7 teams in the entire AHL to miss the playoffs. 25 of the 32 teams make the playoffs every year. Iowa was one of the teams that missed with their 27-37, 6-2 record of .431 points percentage. And look, they didn't have a horrible year, but, you know, top-end scoring wasn't really there, minus Liam Ogren, who was definitely their best scorer every single time he stepped on the ice. So that is one benefit, and of course, Liam Ogren projected to make the Wild, hopefully, full-time next year in 2025-26, but again, there's not that kind of depth. We do have a guy like Hunter Height there who is, again, projected to make the Minnesota Wild in a couple of years. 20 goals in 67 games as a young prospect is pretty good. But as they put in that Athletic article, again, I really suggest you go read it. There's a lot of great stuff. I don't want to steal all their thunder, of course. Go read it for yourself. But I'll read this quote because I think it's a good point here. It's an indictment that none of the once ballyhooed, love that word, by the way, fellas, blue line prospects, Carson Lambos, Ryan O'Rourke, David Spacek, Jack Pert, and traded Damon Hunt have made it to the NHL. The Wild need better from the development of Jesper Wallstedt, Ogren, Jiricek, Hunter Height, Riley Height, and eventually Charlie Stramel. And Stramel, again, had a solid year at Michigan State this year. We talked about that on our other channel, Hattrick HQ. But yeah, like Stramel had a pretty good year there where, you know, his teammate Isaac Howard won NCAA Hobie Baker Award. But this is a great point. Like, really, none of these guys have been full-time NHLers. Lambos, O'Rourke, Spacek. We still have some of them down there. I mean, like, let's just take a look again, right? We got, where is he? David Spacek, they're 7th on the team in scoring with 31 points in 72 games. And it's like, to me, this is one thing that you can only remedy through good drafting and those subtle little trades, right? I mean, AHL trades are very important. You see them happen around the league. And when they happen, you're kind of like, okay, whatever. But developing a winning culture in the AHL is, you know, maybe it's not going to bring your team to a Stanley Cup final, but it gives your guys like a good environment to work out in, right? A team that's successful down to the AHL, especially if you have guys coming up and down throughout the season, which again, a lot of successful teams do have that. Having that kind of same system there and in the NHL and having a winning culture in both, not having one bottom feeder in one and a team that's hopeful to make the playoffs or the Stanley Cup finals in the other, it's not great. So I just want to hear your guys' thoughts because the whole situation down in Iowa is a bit tough right now. So leave your thoughts down below. I would love to hear from you because honestly, it's something that I really do hope improves in the future. And look, again, Wallstedt had not a great year, but the team wasn't that great either. So we'll have to wait and see. But the big news, it's not even just news. We've been talking about this all season long. The trade deadline, Brock Boeser's name was thrown out left and right. Vancouver Canucks fans love Brock Boeser. They want him to stay, but at the price, it's just not going to happen. You ask any Canucks fan, they're saying Boeser is not coming back, not at the price. But it's not just him I want to talk about. And look, First thing I actually want to get into is what the Wild's cap space is looking like heading into next year. So this is courtesy of Puckpedia. And you can see for 25-26, projected cap space is about $20.6 million. Now, there will be about $2.8 million of that coming off due to some people joining the team and I think some overage penalties. But yeah, all in all, we're going to have around 20 million, maybe a bit less to spend. And we know, of course, Faber's contract's coming up, Middleton, that's all factored in here, right? Kirill Kaprizov's is not, because we don't know what that's going to be at this point, and it's going to be something big. As Kirk mentioned yesterday, we could be talking upwards of $15 million a year. So when you're making any kind of signing this offseason, you got to do that knowing that Kirill Kaprizov's money is going to be, well, it's going to be a lot. And again, right now he's making 9, but we do have some good contracts on the team as well. Again, like Boldy's is going to age incredibly. Eriksson Ek, if he gets back to his normal form, will be great. Gaudreau's is great. And, Foligno and Hartman, they do what they need to do. Rossi is another big question mark Kirk talked about yesterday. I'm not going to talk specifically about Rossi, but the big point here is that Minnesota absolutely needs to get depth scoring. We watched this in the playoffs, and Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy, that line was targeted time after time by Vegas, and they still got theirs. Kaprizov and Boldy leading the team in scoring. Hartman having a really good performance as well, I must say, in that series. Point per game with those 2 goals in the eliminating game, but again, you want to have that depth scoring throughout the lineup so that you don't have to play Matt Boldy 25 minutes a night. You don't have to play Kaprizov 25 minutes a night. You don't have to rely on those guys to get you a win, or Gustavsson shutting the door on every single shot. And there is some good talent here, but again, with all the question marks around Rossi and a lot of these depth guys, like the big signing last offseason, Yakov Trenyan, it's like $3.5 million. He had some flashes, but like I'm not sold that that's the big solution here. So getting some depth scoring for this team is very important. And there's a couple names even mentioned in that article, right? And the big ones, of course, are Brock Boeser and Brock Nelson. And I'll start with Brock Nelson because him I'm less sold on. And I want to get your guys' thoughts on both of these because I think they could both provide a lot for us Wild fans. But I feel like with Brock Nelson, at the age of almost 34 years old, he had a good year, 20 goals with the Islanders in 61 games before getting shipped out to Colorado, where he scored 6 goals the rest of the way. He was a mid-30s goal scorer for the 3 years before that. His face-off percentage this year, when he was in New York, was the highest of his career at 53%, though that did drop down to a total of 52 on the season because he was sub 50% with Colorado. He's solid on the face-off dot. Good expected plus-minus. He is a 50 to 60 point guy at this point in his career, I imagine, if you put him with solid players next to him, and he can score you 25 to 30 goals. I don't know how long he's going to be able to do that. My big gripe with Brock Nelson being mentioned in all of these articles, and I mean, no, it's not a slight on the writers. I mean, obviously, Russo and Joe Smith are great, and you have to mention Nelson, and they're not saying this is a guy you have to go to get. I'm just saying, when I see his name, maybe I'm less sold than all of you, and I need to hear your thoughts, because to me, Brock Nelson's a ticking time bomb. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he would be a great fit in this Minnesota Wild lineup here. I'm just not sold that long-term that contract is going to age well. So let me know your thoughts on him. But of course, the big guy we got to talk about is Brock Boeser. And I mean, that's the guy that we've talked about since the possibility of him becoming a free agent even arose. Because again, the guy's from Minnesota and he's going to be out of Vancouver. Now, Vancouver made a big mistake in not trading him at the deadline. And now they're going to lose him for nothing. You talk to any Canucks fan, they pretty much come to terms with it. Like, love him as a person. Don't love him at $8 million long-term on that Vancouver Canucks team with their current cap structure. It doesn't make sense. Their team this year just wasn't good enough. It doesn't take them over the top. They'd be better served spending that money elsewhere. Does not mean Brock Boeser is not an $8 million player. Now, there are concerns because Brock Boeser, for as good as he is, and 50 points in 75 games doesn't seem great, but when you consider everything that was going on in Vancouver, it kind of makes a bit more sense. But look, Brock Boeser, 50 points, that's one thing. He's quite slow at this point in his career. He can't skate very fast, but his skill more than makes up for it. Brock Boeser is an incredible talent in terms of not just goal scoring, but even like he's not like a superstar playmaker, but I think his versatility does get underrated at some points. And I've seen people bring that up. I'm not saying he's a stud defensively, but I'm saying there's going to be a lot of games where you watch Brock Boeser and you're like, oh, his defense is not as bad as I thought it was. And another big thing with Brock Boeser is he comes up in the playoffs. He's only had 2 playoffs there with Vancouver, 17 games back in 1920 with 11 points, played pretty solid there, 4 goals. And just last year, when they made the playoffs as like a very high seed, 12 games, 12 points, 7 goals, even some PIMs, even strength goals, 6 of his 7 at even strength. Like, Brock Boeser's the kind of guy that can still eat 20 minutes a night in the playoffs if you need him to. And the thing with him too is that, like, I think he fits seamlessly into this Wild lineup. If we take a look here, you can put him on the wing with almost anyone. Now, again, Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy, I'd have a hard time breaking that up, and especially since Boeser is not a center, he's a winger, you'd have to play him with a decent playmaking center. I would not love to play him with Gaudreau, but again, I'm one of these people that really thinks that Rossi is going to find a way to stick around in Minnesota, and if that's the case, having Rossi as your second line center with a guy like Brock Boeser on one side, Zuccarello on the other, to me, that is a top six. That is like, that's a legitimate contending top six. Still some stuff to fill out in the bottom, but if you have the money to make that happen, I think this is a great choice. And again, he's linked in all these articles, right? He's the Athletics. Like, look, you talk about free agents, you talk about people the Wild can go get. Brock Nelson, Brock Boeser, maybe even Sam Bennett might be talking about that in a future video. And look, there's still trades that GMBG, our boy Bill Guerin, could go and do, because we know Bill is ready to go out there and do anything that he can to help Kirill Kaprizov stay. And look, we know that the Wild are going to do everything in their power, not just Bill, the ownership group, everyone, to keep Kaprizov around. But let me know your thoughts. We're just starting this offseason. Boeser's name comes up again, the first article of this offseason that we're talking about, and we got to share it with you guys because I'm honestly hyped to see what's going to go down this offseason. Am I going to get overhyped again for something that might not live up to expectations? Maybe, but that's just kind of the nature of being a Wild fan sometimes. We've learned to deal with that, so I'm kind of excited. I don't care, though. I'm getting my hopes up. If it doesn't come true, it doesn't come true, but I'm excited with this core. The money's coming off the books, of course, the buyouts. Didn't specifically say that, but I think we know that at this point. So let me know your thoughts on all this down below, because that'll do it for this episode of Wild Digest. If you enjoyed, hit that free subscribe button, guys. We're going to be here every single day this offseason trying to pump that content out for you. The Minnesota Wild are awesome. They got a bright future, and I hope that you stick along with us for the ride. I've been your host, Josh Gosse, and I'll catch you in the next one.